Hello, welcome back to Sparky Hobbies. My name is Ben and we are continuing on how to build the best deck ever. We've already established ways that you could do it, aggro, combo, and control, and we've also talked about how it is important to be able to kill your opponent consistently and have games usually wrapped up by turns 4 and 5. The next thing that you need to make sure, if you want to build the best deck ever, is that your deck consistently plays cards and gets you the cards you need. You need to be able to play cards every single turn. Your deck cannot run out of steam and it cannot stall. So, how do you get this to happen? Well, there are several ways, and we're going to go ahead and cover a few of them. We'll go back to no, not quite yet. We're not going to handle that quite yet. Yeah, okay. So you can, what you need to make sure that you can do is sometimes you can do it with drawing a lot of cards. Basically, the more cards that you draw, the more likely you'll be to get the card that you need. Whether that's going to be more creatures, a higher rate of creatures, you're going to just play more creatures, and the one card per draw, the one draw per turn is not going to do it for you. You need to keep on playing creatures and creatures and creatures. That's the way to do it in aggro. Control is usually drawing more control cards. Combo, it's getting the card you need. You could draw cards and that will help you play more consistent games. Another strategy is basically getting back the cards you need and replaying it, and that's something called reanimation, but we're not really going to go into that. Another key kind of terminology that Magic people use is ramp, and the way to play some really high cost spells early, or even get there, because you're not necessarily guaranteed of drawing the land you need. You're not always basically guaranteed to draw a land in every turn to get to that converted mana cost 6 creature or spell. So how do you get there? Like if I wanted to play Phyrexian Rebirth and use that to sort of shut my opponent down, that costs 6 mana. That means that there's likely no way that I'm going to be able to win by turn 4 or 5 if I'm only playing 1 land per turn. And so another way to do it is something called ramp, and it's named after a card called Rampant Growth, but this is a good example of a card that ramps. This is a very famous card called Soul Ring, and it says I pay 1, but I permanently get an artifact that will tap for 2 colorless mana. So I can, instead of playing Trinket Mage on turn 3, I can play it on turn 2. So not only does it accelerate my mana curve, but it also gets me to play creatures ahead of time. That's another way to basically, win games, is to have explosive beginnings. But it also can get you to the higher casting costs spells that will help you shut down your opponent or win the game. So that's another one. And there's something called color fixing, which if you build a 2-color deck, you might have red and white spells, or in the case of Muruganda Petroglyphs, it has white and green spells. So if you don't have the color requirement, you're not going to be able to play your cards consistently. So something like Arid Mesa and a red and white deck will get you a mountain if you need a mountain. It'll get you a plains if it needs a plains. You can choose. It will do the color fixing for you, and that's what the Magic terminology for it, the geek speak is for it. It's called color fixing. The probably most important thing about being able to play your cards consistently is something called mana curve. And mana curve is an overall deck construction strategy where you kind of stack the deck with the number of cards that you need to play on certain turns. The best way to basically kind of do this example is that if your deck is filled with nothing but creatures that cost 6, you're not going to be doing anything for the first couple of turns, because it's going to take you a while to get up the land count and generate the mana you need to play those creatures. So what you're going to need to do is diversify your converted mana cost throughout the deck so that you can consistently play cards, that you have cards to play on turns 1, that you have cards that you can play on turn 2, and this is what is meant by the geek speak and terminology called the mana curve. And it's initially this that kind of led me to do this video, because if I'm going to talk about the Murugana Petroglyphs, we just have to simply talk about what makes a deck work. So mana curve is probably the most important of any of those factors in playing your cards consistently, that you have to address it. It has to be addressed in every single deck that you build, pretty much. Like, you might be able to do without ramp, you might be able to do without color fixing if you draw one color fixing. Reanimation is actually just not a very common theme at all. Not every single deck needs card draw, but almost every single deck, like only 1 out of every 1,000 decks, will not really need to look at mana curve too much. But primarily every single deck will need mana curve. I would pretty much say, it would affect every deck, but cards like Black Lotus sort of kind of turn it a little bit over. Okay. The next is sort of the crossover between cards in your deck and strategy. So it gets a little bit blurry in this next point, which is, who's the beatdown? Do you have the best board position the entire game, from turn 1 all the way through to kill your opponent? And if you lose your board position, can you regain it? And knowing if you're the beatdown is the strategy part, and setting up your deck so that you can be the beatdown is the deck construction part. And who's the beatdown? The beatdown is Magic vocab, geek speak again, for a very famous article that was written by a Magic player, professional Magic player and tournament winner named Mike Flores. And it was like a pivotal piece of literature in the Magic the Gathering world, and it is so important that I have linked the article to the description below. And because it's sort of a convoluted article, and there are a lot of good articles about this sort of crossover between strategy and deck construction, that I've linked several other articles to it. So there's about 5 articles. It's that important. In fact, there's a really easy way to see who's the beatdown, because one of the major factors that affects Magic comes to play specifically in addressing who's the beatdown, who's in the best board position, who's winning the game right now. And that is luck. A lot of new players, a lot of people that maybe don't come across Magic, basically believe that luck is a huge part of the game, and that is not true. Luck actually has very little to do with Magic. It just happens to impact greatly one of the key factors in Magic strategy, which is ensuring that you're the beatdown. Because where luck enters the game of Magic is your initial hand. And usually whoever has the best initial hand is going to be the beatdown. They're the ones who are going to be the one who is winning the game, and you're going to be the one who's trying to regain control of the game. And that's almost entirely based on your initial hand. Once you've drawn a few cards, played a few cards, and it gets down to basically card quality, your mana curve, deck construction, so the luck disappears after the initial hand, after a few turns. But it just so happens to be that it affects who's the beatdown greatly. So we'll go ahead and address this in the next video.